Today we're reviewing the Cannondale Habit HT2. I'm really excited for this bike. Comes in under 1,500 bucks, and for the first time ever, I got a bike in for review and the price went down on the MSRP. This now retails for $1,350. Hard to find through axle mountain bikes with boost spacing front and rear for under 1,800 bucks these days. Cannondale's done it. And they have an even cheaper one, the Habit HT3, which is 1,100 bucks MSRP. That's awesome. Man, immediately you notice the upright seating position, the steep seat angle. This bike's got a lot of drag. It's got some meaty tires on it. I feel like this bike was meant to be kind of an all-rounder. It can do just about anything. Yeah, you really notice that upright seating position. Very modern feeling. And I appreciate the short 165mm cranks. This bike feels heavy when you ride it. It's got a lot of drag when you're climbing. So whenever I review a bike, I thought you were a javelina. I'm glad you weren't. We gotta educate people on proper trail etiquette. Hey, buddy. So whenever I review a bike, especially a bike in this price range, I'm reviewing the frame far more than the components. Because the components can easily be swapped, but the frame is the heart and soul of the bike. A lot of people see me review a bike with nice wheels or a nice fork and say, of course you like the bike. You had nice components. I've been doing this long enough. I can tune out what's the components and what's the bike. Oh, this is fun. Real neutral riding position. Man, that's weird. When I get on the pedals, I just feel drag in the drivetrain somewhere. But when we're coasting, I don't feel it. The hub has poor engagement, but for $1,350, are we even a little bit surprised? I barely don't even want to mention it, but it is noticeable. Good little climber. Yeah, you're not fighting this bike. You don't have to muscle it around. I think this is going to suit newer and intermediate riders really well. Back on my first look video, we measured the actual geometry and it was pretty on par with Cannondale's website. This RockShox Judy's performing better than it should. It is brand new. Not bad. Oh, I am by no means recovered. I'm still sick. I still have my neurological disease that makes recovery awful, and I'm just in constant pain. But I really wanted to review this bike, and I get so excited from a bike ride. The adrenaline kicks in and I can ignore the pain for an hour while I film a review. Oh, but then I pay for it later. This bike feels heavy, and it is heavy. It's over 33 pounds for an aluminum bike, but for that amazing price, it gets a huge pass there. You should always be wary of people, quote unquote, reviewing bikes online that have never actually thrown a leg over it. The easiest and laziest way to review bikes is to compare their specs on their component build. And that's the laziest and least useful way to compare bikes. It all comes down to how they ride. We buy these bikes to ride them, not to think about the specs on them. It's all about the experience. So make sure to support people who actually ride and review bikes, and make sure they've ridden a few and it's not like their first hardtail and they come out saying, this is the best hardtail ever, even though it's the only one I've ever ridden. That's hype, not a review. This is not a sponsored review. I'm not paid by Cannondale or anybody to review this. I'm supported by my wonderful viewers and my patrons. Huge shout out to my patrons. This channel wouldn't exist if it weren't for you. Oh man, I'm tired. So compared to a lot of bikes coming out now, reach is a little shorter, Rear center is a little longer. That puts you kind of right in the center of the bike on a size medium. I think on a small, that rear chainstay is gonna feel noticeably long. But on the medium, large, and extra large, I think it'll be nice and balanced. I just feel like I'm sitting in the middle of the bike and I don't have to throw my weight around much at all. I just kind of sit there and let the bike do its thing. Kind of an autopilot ride. Let's push this bike a little bit harder, see what happens. I will say the build assembly quality of this was really low. Whoever assembled this did not really know what they were doing as far as brake routing, cable routing, things like that, but I was able to fix that. Still blown away by the price of this thing. This thing just feels really balanced for just about anything. Probably not going to be my first choice for double black diamonds or XC races, but it's up for a lot of fun. With the low-rise bar and the longer chainstay, it's harder to pop the front wheel up, but not impossible. Really comfortable position for steep climbs. GeoChart said this had a 64-degree head angle. It's actually got a 65, which I prefer. 64 would be too slack on this. Man, it loves to climb with that steep seat angle. The steeper the climb, the happier that is. I almost feel like the seat angle is a little too steep. Kind of want to slide my saddle back a centimeter. Compared to my personal bikes with amazing engaging hubs, you feel the poor hub engagement on this. Even some of my beginner friends have ridden this and they're like, whoa, it feels like you do a half a pedal before it grabs. And that's just what happens when you got to hit a price point under 1,500 bucks. What a great riding experience. If this had been my first, second, or third mountain bike, I'd have been stoked. It's got a really neutral riding position. It does not feel too stretched out. That little bit shorter reach than most other mediums gives it kind of a, oh, how do I describe that? It gives it the ability to kind of throw it around a little more. Loses a tiny bit of straight line mobbing stability, but switchbacks or changing directions or playing around is going to be easier. I think they picked the right length stem on this. Looks like about a 40 mil stem. One thing that could definitely be improved, even for the price, is to have fully taped rims and to send valve stems with it, so you could pop it up tubeless immediately. I love that it's got 30i rims. That really helps for bigger tires. I love that they spec'd real tires. Yeah, just a nice balanced bike. You really don't have to throw your weight around a lot. Standing up and pedaling is just fine. Sitting and spinning is just fine. All right, there are going to be lots of questions about the spec, so we're going to talk about it, but really you should be paying attention to the frame and how it rides, not so much which crankset it has, etc. This is the Habit HT2, comes in at $1,350. The Habit HT3 is $1,100. That's 250 bucks cheaper. It's got a less expensive fork, narrower wheels, still has a dropper, still has the same Advent X drivetrain, which I love. Zero complaints about that. If you ride maybe once a month, I think this build makes sense to get. It's going to take you a long time before you're wearing out components or destroying anything or needing to upgrade. If you ride weekly, I think I'd go with the Habit HT3, replace the fork, dropper, and maybe the wheels, and have an excellent, excellent bike. I think the dropper's a huge miss. This is a 120 dropper. I never have this much seat sticking out. So I think that was a miss by Cannondale to not spec it with a longer dropper. I could probably run a 200 mil dropper in here. It's amazing that on the HT3, the $1,100 model, you still get an air adjustable fork and a dropper. That's incredible. So personally, for how I ride and what I'd like, I would get the HT3. I'd swap out the fork. I'd put in a 175, maybe a 200 mil dropper. I'd measure that and make sure I get the right dropper. And then I'd probably update the wheels with something like a 30i with some high engaging rear hubs. And I'd set it up tubeless and I'd just go have a blast. I love that it's got a 130 mil fork. The Judy feels pretty good right now. When these Judys get a lot of miles on them, they start developing a little more play, a little bit more knocking, especially if you're a heavy rider or you're like hucking it off stuff. So if you're over 200 pounds, I'd probably drop down to the HT3 and get a burlier fork up there, a 34 or 35 mil stanchion fork up there. How about the frame? Is it worth doing like a bougie build on this? Probably. There are still some little things like the cable routing and like that little plastic cable guide and how this comes through here that I think are a little inferior to something just like super premium, like a New House Hummingbird or my Binary Maniac or something like that. It's never going to quite have the fit and finish of that, which isn't surprising because those frames cost more than the entire bike. So is it worth putting $6,000 parts on? Probably not. Is it worth putting $2,000 or $3,000 parts on? I think so. I think there are going to be some really sweet Habit HTs out there. The world needed this. They needed an entry-level hardtail that was affordable, but that was still worth upgrading. So you could ride it like this for 3 years. And then when you decide you got the budget for something special or you really want to bling it out, you get a nice set of carbon wheels, or you get a really nice fork, or you get a longer dropper. And then that bike just steps up another level and the frame isn't holding it back. This is what I've been waiting for a long time on this channel, is an opportunity to get a bike that's under 1,500 bucks that's actually worth putting money into. Now, is it going to be my dream frame? No, personally not for me and how I like to ride. I like a little shorter rear end, but a lot of people I ride with that ride a lot of flow, that aren't like manualing, wheeling, bunny hopping, doing trials move, they just kind of flow with the trail, they're actually going to prefer something like this. And it's important to know what kind of trail you ride to know what geometry suits that trail best. I try to provide that info as much as possible on my reviews, but if you ever want to pick my brain on which bike I would recommend for you and your riding style and your budget, I do that over on Patreon. I'd be happy to help you over there. Patreon.com/hardtailparty. I work with tons of people sorting through hundreds of bikes to decide which one is going to be the best fit for your needs and budget and riding style. I'm really impressed by this bike. Currently, there's nothing holding me back on this other than the dropper. Like if I were to take this on a double black diamond, I would go for a little higher rise bar. I need a little bit taller front end and I would run a longer dropper. But man, it's doing pretty dang well. Let's go take it on some black with a couple spicy features on it to see how it holds up. That hub would definitely be something I would upgrade for technical climbs. It's one of the lowest engagement hubs I've ridden. There's just a lot of free play before it grabs. That's if you're like stopping and starting, you're pedaling a lot, or like doing these little burst moves to ratchet up stuff. If you just spin a lot, you're not gonna be bothered by it. So it really depends on your trails and how you ride. All right, we got some spicy, scary moves up here. Let me pick my line. It's been a minute since I've been here. Get a little spooked by this feature on this bike. Whole bunch of like 24 to 36 inch steps at an already slant, and it kind of pulls you into this loose stuff. I don't quite have the confidence that I do on some of my other bikes. Boy, it sure is a good looking bike. Just those subtle curves and swoops. Looks absolutely beautiful. Let's see if I feel comfortable doing this. No, I don't. Only a 120 mil dropper freaks me out on stuff like this. But the good news is the frame's ready for it, so that could be easily swapped. Here we go. Yeah, that was spooky. The saddle was kind of in my way. Fork didn't instill the confidence that I get on a bigger fork, but we got it. And we're just kind of running into some of the limitations of the current build, but this frame will definitely do that. It's a quiet little frame too. I'm not getting a lot of chain noise. Got a pedestrian up here. Come on up, I'll wait for you. You're good. You got the right of way. Having a good day?
Yeah, how's your ride?
Good, it's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful hike.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. I'm glad they spec such great tires on this. Torque's a little pogo sticky. I need to slow the rebound down. Let me do that real quick. Not much adjustment on here, but we got something. Let's see if 3 clicks of rebound help. Yeah, that helps. It's amazing how far bikes have come. So I'll charge down this faster on an enduro hardtail, but this will do it. You just kind of reel it in a little. I'm running tubeless pressures with tubes. Not a good idea, but I wanted to see the ride as close to tubeless as possible. Man, having a little bit of a hard time controlling it. Part of it's that fork, and part of it is the dropper just being in the way on these spicier moves. Yeah, a little bit nervous on that. I'm really impressed by this bike. On that spicy section where I was nervous, a little bit of that's due to the shorter reach, a little bit of that's due to the longer chainstay. On steep, steppy downhill things, I prefer more of the bike ahead of me, whereas I felt like I was a little more ahead of the bike. And geometry on the head angle was just fine. It's just the nature of this bike. So it takes some getting used to me to readjust to that shorter reach. I'd probably end up shifting my weight back a little, but not too much. With a longer rear end and shorter front end, it does feel like your center of mass is a little bit further forward than a lot of bikes. That works really well on flat stuff, on greens, on blues. When it gets real steep, I feel like I'm a little too far forward and I need to back up to redistribute my weight. But some people really like that feeling. You really don't have to muscle the bike around. You don't have to get over the front and weight the front so it doesn't wash out. You just kind of stay in the middle and let the bike do its thing. And I think for intermediate riders or people who aren't just shredding or people who want to be in a neutral riding position, this is going to be fantastic. So apart from the dropper, I think Cannondale nailed the spec. Brakes are great. We got 180 rotors front and rear. Great choice with that. Meaty tires. These high roller 2s were draggy. I could feel them on the climbs. Another thing I love is that you can fit 29 by 3.0s in here. This is super versatile. It could be a great bike packer. If you want a cheap bike packer that you can still ride on the trails, I wouldn't have to change a thing as a bike packer. I'd run 3.0s on here, maybe 2.8s, even 2.6s with a 30i rim. And then I'd probably run a rack, but you could get a saddlebag too, and you could just handle some really technical terrain like Colorado Trail or Arizona Trail and have a really affordable bike to do that. If I was building it for me and how I like to ride, and it was like your only bike and you want a dialed bike, I'd get the 3, and then I'd swap the fork, wheels, and dropper and have a blast. If you want to pick my brain on which parts I would recommend for that build, become a patron. I do that. Lots of one-on-one chatting and consultation with my patrons to help them do that. It's been so fun to be able to review this. I am excited. This is going to be one of my top recommendations for bikes under $1,500, starter bikes, loaner bikes, second bikes, bike packing bikes that can still shred, that don't break the bank. Well done, Cannondale. Thanks for watching, everybody. There's a party in the mountains and you're invited.